We want to start by converting from degrees to radians. And our formula is this. We take the angle and we multiply by pi and we divide by 180. Some of these you're going to know well. Some of you might not know them as well. We're going to try to do it without a calculator. If you have to use a calculator, then go ahead and grab that. So this one is going to be 100 times pi over 180. If you want to simplify that and they both end in a 0, you can go ahead and cross those zeros off. And what is 10 over 18 reduced to? 5 over 9. So this is 5 pi over 9. Look at your next one, 18 degrees. I multiply by pi, I divide by 180. How many times does 18 go into 180? 10 times, right? So this will reduce to pi over 10. 70 degrees. 70 times pi divided by 180. Both 70 and 180 are divisible by what? 10. So we get 7 pi over 18. $450 pi over 180. What can I cross off right away? The zeros. And now I see 45 and 18 are both divisible by? They're both divisible by 9. 45 divided by 9. So I get 5 pi over 2. 120 is one of the special ones that we talked about when we practiced. Anybody remember what 120 converts to? Two pi over 3. 120 times pi over 180. If you notice again, the zeros cancel. 12 over 18 reduces to 2 over 3. So 2 pi over 3. And 200. Negative 200 pi over 180. What can I cross off right away? The zeros. And we end up with negative 10 pi over 9. Negative angle. So give you a real life example here. Okay, we're going to go through this and then you'll get your assignment. Now we're going to convert the other way. We're going to convert from radians to degrees. In order to convert from radians to degrees, we take theta, we multiply by 180, and we divide it by pi. So what you're going to do is theta now is 2 pi over 5, and you multiply by 180 over pi. The important thing to notice is what's going to cancel. Pi will cancel. Now, you have two options. You can either do 2 times 180 and divide it by 5, or you do 180 divided by 5 and then multiply by 2. It's up to you. Most people probably need to use your calculator in that situation, I'm guessing. Yeah, and I would say that's pretty reasonable. I do happen to know that in this situation, 180 divided by 5 is 36, times 2 is 72. So we get 72 degrees there. Let's look at one where you don't have to use your calculator. You have pi over 10, and you're going to multiply by 180, and you're divided by pi. What happens to the pi's? They're gone, and I'm left with 180 over 10, which is? So pi over 10 is the same as 18 degrees. Five pi over 3, you could just write, I multiply by 180, I divide by pi. You can see that the pi's cancel. 180 divided by 3 is 60 times 5, 300. So again, I would encourage you, if you want to use your calculator, you can, but I would encourage you to try to do it without as much as possible. 3 pi times 180 over pi. If you don't see a fraction, you can just write it over 1. Again, the pi's cancel. 3 times 180 is 540 degrees. This was one from your notes. Negative 3 pi over 4. We're going to multiply by 180, and we're going to divide by pi. The pi's cancel. Anybody remember what you get if you take 180 and you divide it into fourths? Think about the picture we drew. You take 180, if you take 180 and divide it in half, you get 90. So if you divide it into fourths, you get, and what's 3 of the 45s? 135. Again, there's multiple ways to think about it. If you have to use your calculator, fine, go with the calculator. But here's how you can use it without. And then 11 pi over 20 times 180 over pi. And those cancel. Anybody know 180 divided by 20? 9 times 11? 99 degrees. Finally, we're going to get to an example that Ethan just talked about, and that's about these positive and negative angles. The last thing that we're going to discuss is how to sketch angles. This is an important part of trigonometry that we'll use. When we sketch angles, just simply make an XY coordinate plane. We're going to put 0 degrees there. We're going to put 90 degrees there. You don't have to write this out every time. I'm just doing it so that you can see where everything goes. Every angle has 2 parts to it. It has what we call the initial side. That's where you begin. And as the terminal side, that's where we end. The initial side is always on the x-axis like that. Okay. Anybody see by looking at this what quadrant 200 degrees is going to put me in? It's going to put me in the 3rd quadrant. So we just estimate it. It's a little bit past the 180. And then finally, you're going to use this arc there to make sure you see that we turn that direction. When we measure angles, we actually turn in that counterclockwise direction. The next angle is negative. This is where you really want to make sure you're paying attention. It's not difficult, it's just new. It's something you haven't seen before. Forget the negative. Suppose I were to do 150 degrees. Which quadrant would 150 degrees put me in? The 2nd quadrant. Well, if it's a negative angle, instead of rotating counterclockwise, you rotate clockwise. So everybody agree 150 is just short of 2 quadrants? So I'm going to go just short of 2 quadrants in the other direction. And to show that rotation, I show like that. So that's a negative angle. So the first thing you're going to have to do on your test is, number 1, you're going to have to convert from degrees to radians. The second thing you have to do is convert radians to degrees. And then you'll also have to be able to sketch angles. Again, you can call me a bad teacher, call me stupid, you call me ugly. All that is within reason. You can't tell me that I don't tell you the things you're going to have to know for the test. Then you would be a liar. Please switch this from 600 to 400, and yeah, let's just go 400 degrees, okay? I don't like the 600. That's going to confuse us a little bit more than we need right now. 400 degrees. Do you notice that that's more than 360? How much more than 360 is it? Just 40 degrees. So what we do is we draw an angle in a 40-degree position. However, we need to show that you went around the circle more than once. In order to show you went around the circle more than once, you actually draw that, that piece there to show you went around more than once. Well, so 600, so 0, 90, 180, 270, 360, and if we go 90 more, we'd be at 450. 90 more, we'd be at 540. 90 more, we'd be at 630. So it looks like 600 would be somewhere about there, right? And so you'd be like that. So not quite 2. 720 would be 2 full ones, right? Yeah. So you end up having to kind of work it through. So good question. Last examples, these are all in radians. You should be able to know where pi over 4 is. Pi over 4 is how many degrees? 45. So you can do the conversion and then sketch it. 45-degree angle right there. (11 pi over 10). You want to convert it to degrees? You multiply by 180 over pi. I can see that the pi's cancel. What's 180 divided by 10? 18. What's 18 times 11? 198. So which quadrant does that place me in? Third quadrant. Again, the graph doesn't have to be really pretty. I just want to make sure that it's reasonable within the quadrant. And finally, pi over 2. Pi over 2, do you remember how many degrees that is? So negative 90 degrees. So I go 90 degrees, but I go in the opposite direction than I was before. And there you have it. It is time for homework.